Hey everybody, welcome back to World Drum Club. I'm super excited to have a percussion discussion with just a master percussionist. Let's welcome him to this interview. Taku Hirano, thank you for being here.
Hey, so great to be here, Kalani. It's so great to see you virtually. And yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And for those of you who don't know you, could you just I know there's a lot to say, but give him a quick elevator speech. What are you doing? Where'd you come from? What are you doing?
Yeah, my name is Taku Hirano. I was born in Osaka, Japan. Grew up in California for the most part. I've been a percussionist since the age of 9 and started out kind of in a typical public school band type of situation, played an orchestra, concert band, whatnot. Studied a lot of classical percussion. Moved overseas for part of my high school years to Hong Kong, and that's when I got really serious about classical percussion, studying with the principal timpanist and the principal percussionist of the Hong Kong Philharmonic. My ultimate goal was to go to Juilliard. Moved back to California before I graduated from high school and went to a school of the arts in my U.S. hometown of Fresno, California, as that point when I started really getting into world percussion. The school itself had a salsa band, Latin jazz combo, and so I really got into Afro-Cuban and Brazilian percussion, and that's around age 16 or so. I went to Berklee College of Music for my undergrad studies, and went there for drum set as well as hand percussion. And hand percussion was actually not available as a principal instrument when I went to Berklee, when I started at Berklee, but about halfway through, they offered it as a major, as a principal instrument. So I switched over to that. So I ended up being Berklee's very first hand percussion principal graduate because I did the 4 year program in my latter 2 years. During my 4 years at Berklee, I studied intensively with Giovanni Hidalgo. So I studied 4 years with him privately. And then I also studied with a world percussionist, Jamie Haddad, where I learned a lot of Middle Eastern frame drumming, North African frame drumming, and a lot of Indian rhythmic studies. And then I moved, tried to start my career after college. I moved to Los Angeles to kind of get into the session world and the touring world, and started grad school at California Institute of the Arts, where I studied Indian percussion and West African percussion. So uh, I'm kind of an all around world percussionist. I studied in Japan on traditional Japanese taiko drumming, and I've studied in Cuba and spent time there. Was a master percussionist as well. So, and then as far as my career, I've just mainly gotten calls for a lot of pop, rock, R&B artists, and so I try to do what I can in terms of bringing in traditional hand percussion instruments into non-traditional settings.
Yeah, and you have quite the pedigree for percussion. It's amazing. I do want to talk to you about both Berkeley and Cal Arts, and
Sure.
maybe give people who are considering those schools or who have heard about those schools because they are, just world renowned and unique places. Maybe we
Yeah.
can get get a take, your take on that. Um,
Yeah. Well, I
I,
mean, I haven't been in college for a very long time, but for me, it was really great just to have, a just be able to connect with so many amazing teachers, master players, obviously that I would not have access to had I stayed in my hometown of Fresno, California. So, uh, I, for me, education is very important. Just and learning the tradition and learning the history is something that has always been really important and inspiring and exciting for me. So world percussion unto itself is music, but it's also anthropology and sociology, and I really enjoy it. So it's my passion.
yeah, and I wanted to. Of course, I could totally relate to that, but one question I wanted to ask you is why hand percussion? Because you play drum set, you play orchestral percussion, you're trained in all
Mhm.
that. And I understand where you're coming from, but I'd like to get your take on that. Why hand percussion? What is it that is, extra exciting about that?
Uh, I mean, there's obviously some sort of untangible thing of me just being totally drawn to it, and I think I have been since a very young age. It's the notion of skin on skin. playing hand drums. There's something very primal. Percussion itself is what essentially, arguably, the second oldest instrument on Earth. If you're including from a vibrational level, the Big Bang being the first, then not sure, but
Yeah.
but for all intents and purposes, the voice is the oldest instrument on Earth, with two sticks or a stick hitting a membrane, or idiophones and membranophones being the second oldest instrument on Earth. So there's something very primal to it. Um, so yeah, it just something within me. It just has always resounded with me that percussion, specifically hand percussion, is just inspiring, and it just touches me. And I think
Mm.
that also it's quite amazing, like what a great hand percussionist could do with literally just their hands on a tabletop or on their lap, or on some sort of drum, or pick up a stick or a rock or whatever. Just like what you can accomplish is just like absolutely mind blowing. So yeah, so it just is just a passion of mine, because it speaks to me, to my core.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is primal. I think Mickey Hart in his book Drumming at the Edge of Magic, or
Uh-huh.
maybe one of the other ones, said that the universe was drummed into existence, with
Yes.
that big bang.
Yep.
So there was two things you said there that I want to follow up on. One is
Yep.
that one area would be about being a rhythmist, and I
Mhm.
also want to place this in the context of some of the popular messaging around percussion, which is that, oh, everybody's a drummer, everybody can play. We have the kind of the drum circle side of things, which is about accessibility and inclusion and
Mhm.
fun. However, I argue, and I'm trying to message in kind of the opposite direction now. Not that people shouldn't try playing with drums and percussion, but that these are not, they're basic, but they're not easy. You've probably had friends, like guitar player, bass player friends, and they try to play a shaker, right? They try to play a groove,
Totally.
and it just doesn't go anywhere quick. And so I don't know. Yeah, talk about making music with very simple things, and what does that take? Because I think there's a lot of skill that has to go into these very basic instruments and being able to play music on them. Can you talk
Most
about that?
definitely. Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, like any fine instrument, uh, a percussion instrument does take skill and discipline, and just hours, time spent with the instrument, learning it, feeling it. It's no different than picking up a violin or a guitar or whatever. It essentially is an extension of you. The great thing with percussion is, and what makes it so difficult, is there are so many different types of instruments, and all of them to some point have to become an extension of the player. And so that's what's so challenging being a percussionist, is having a handle on so many different things with so many different techniques, so many different muscle groupings you're using, so many different touches, and the physicality for a lot of the instruments, or the finesse of some of the instruments. So um, it's not easy. It's really hard. It's a
Yeah.
lifetime of of study if you really want to do it right, and pay homage not only to the masters of those particular instruments and the styles and traditions, but also to the instrument itself, that you want to have, you want to honor it. So it is a pretty deep thing, in my opinion. So yes, I do love the accessibility of um, group percussion, drum circles, and whatnot. But I think that there are two different categories, and with two different end games. I love the inclusivity, and I love that people are able to experience rhythm at whatever level, and at whatever uh, level of proficiency. That there is some degree of accessibility, but at the same time, you can't take percussion lightly either.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is a discipline for sure, for sure.
It is. And as somebody who has studied with, I know you study with Mamadi a bit, and you've studied with lots of master percussionists, from all
Yeah,
kinds of different genres, like you said, Afro-Cuban, West African, Brazilian, and
yeah,
others, and orchestral. And I like to
yeah.
remind people that, like, for the djembe, for example, is a classical West African instrument. It takes just as much effort and time to be good on djembe as it does to be a great timpanist, for example, or any kind of percussion. I think we get caught up in the Eurocentric view that we put those instruments on a pedestal, and then we give
Definitely.
the hand percussion to children to play. And
Yeah.
that is a slippery slope. It's something that we ought to be aware of. That
Oh,
we're
most definitely. Most
framing
definitely.
things, yeah, in a respectful
Yeah.
way.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then obviously, and the music that the musical, cultural, and history that the particular instrument or instruments are a part of. On top of that,
Hmm.
So, yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely.
So the other thing was you mentioned earlier the anthropological aspect of it, and I find
Yeah.
that exciting. Can you just talk a little bit about, I don't know, your your journey in terms of, when we play music, we pick up an instrument, we pick up a culture, we connect with a culture and people. Are there any highlights or anything that you just want to share about that aspect of it?
I mean, the fact that a lot of percussion through the millennia around the world, they are um, in, instruments, meaning musical instruments, but they are instruments and implements of the culture for a lot of sacred human events. Whether that is that a particular drum is being used to play a rhythm that is part of a ceremony for the cycle of life or crops or whatnot, and so it is deep. It's not that you're just playing the music of a composer, it's that you are actually playing ritual music. It's sacred, in a lot of cultures. And so there is a kind of a sacred versus secular um, tightrope kind of that you walk when you start getting into very traditional instruments of other cultures. So as far as highlights for me, I'm studying in Cuba was amazing. I mainly study popular music there, Latin jazz and various salsa, timba styles and and offshoots. But I also was able to study sacred percussion as well, which would encompass different instruments, different rhythms, and whatnot. And yeah, it was quite an amazing anthropological experience just to be able to watch ceremonies and learn all that goes into it, because you're not just learning literally how to hit the drum and play this specific rhythm. You're learning what they call calls, as you would know,
Hmm.
and just the interplay and contrapuntal rhythms between multiple instruments within a drum ensemble, and the songs that go with it, and the dances that go with those types of
Right.
things. It all goes hand in hand. So, yeah, that's just a huge highlight for me. I don't get to do that as often anymore. So I would say when people ask me what my hobby is, I think my hobby is learning about the instruments compared to my job, which is playing them oftentimes in non-traditional settings. So
Awesome. Yes, and
yeah,
thank you for that. And
yeah,
I have to correct something I said, and I want to clarify this with you. I was actually thinking, I said you studied with Mama Keita. I don't know if you did. I was thinking that I read that you studied with Giovanni Hidalgo
yes.
for a bit. So correct me if I'm wrong. Many
I
people
did
have
not.
studied with Mamadi. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
one of them.
that went by very quickly. No, and in fact, I am very reluctant to play djembe because in respect to the instrument, I have not studied with any master players on djembe compared to what I've studied. As far as Afro-Cuban percussion, yes, I studied with Giovanni for 4 years straight,
Hmm.
and then in Cuba I was studying with Changuito and Roberto Vizcaino for a stretch, in their homes. And so, like, yes, I've had access and the opportunity to study with master percussionists, but yeah, because I have studied with masters in specific instruments, like I know what it takes on other instruments. So I can play
Hmm.
on a djembe, but I don't profess to like know the ins and outs culturally or whatnot, you know,
Right.
at
Which
certain
is why,
instruments.
I own a set of tabla,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I'm not gonna. I can't. Too many things to do.
definitely.
That's a big commitment. So yeah, you're in your main area, and I want to get into what you're doing now because a lot of people are, if
Mhm.
they don't know, they should know that you're a very sought after percussionist in the pop field. You've played with all kinds of artists from hip hop, rock, pop, just everyone.
Hmm.
I, it's such a big topic, but could you just talk about your approach as a percussionist? because for people who don't know, right, how do you view going into a gig? There's recordings, of course. There's parts that are established. How do you balance, serving the music that exists maybe on a recording or something with bringing your own, bringing you into the music as well. And I'm sure that's different for different artists, but maybe just, I don't know, you can talk about some of your favorite gigs or how
Yeah.
you approach them in general.
Like again, yes, it differs from artist to artist as well as genre to genre within contemporary popular music. So some styles will have more percussion on it that I'm emulating. Like if I'm playing an old school R&B gig, there may be conga parts on it. The technique used during those recordings may not have been very traditional techniques, but the parts are there. And those types of cases, when I get called to back up, I toured with Isaac Hayes. When I was playing with him, there were some percussion parts, so I would definitely cue into those things and have that as a jumping off point. Uh, when I get into more pop gigs, then there are parts as uh, accessories, percussion, whatnot, person on the bandstand that I will cover those parts. So they may not be traditional like conga or bongo part, but when I take a listen, I'll be like, oh, there's finger snaps. I'm going to use my sampler and I'm going to play these. I'm going to cover finger snaps and maybe a shaker on this tune. So there's always something when I walk into a situation for me to cover. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
um, and sometimes especially if you're a sideman, you have to be pretty humble and take kind of your ego out of it. You could be like, oh, that's that part or that rhythm is not right. Well, it's not right in the context of like a traditional Afro-Cuban setting, but so maybe they took the producer who knows nothing about Afro-Cuban music but found this really cool loop, but they started it on a different beat, and then all of a sudden
Right.
you're going to have to emulate that, and you're like, oh, that's totally wrong. It's supposed to be this, but is it supposed to be that? Because it's totally in a different context, and the song was crafted with the wrong thing, you know, uh, in the place where it lies in the song. That is some huge commercial hit for some major pop star, So there's a lot of times where even though like it's easy for me to say, like sometimes I've had to practice what I preach, where it's kind of like, oh, okay, like yeah, I have to take my ego out of certain things, and I think that's what's kept me working. Also, is like, at some points is just being the humility that sometimes it takes, and the patience that it takes, as a percussionist. So yeah,
Absolutely. Those are all amazing points. And let's reiterate that, because just because something might be correct, like you said, correct in a traditional, let's say Afro-Cuban format, let's just take like a bat, right? But the recording is 1, 2, 3, 4, bat, bat,
yeah,
right? Kind of typical example. But we have to, like you said, just play the part that works, play the part that people are used to, play the part that the
yeah,
leader wants.
yeah. I mean, I will try and be like, now this is what's there. This is what's traditionally. Is this what you want? Is that specifically what you want? Like I may like float it out there, because sometimes the artist may or the musical director would be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's what they totally meant to do. My bad, whatever. And then it's like, okay, no problem. That because sometimes you're hired because you are the expert,
Right.
and so yeah, so there's always a kind of a fine line, but like I was going, what I was saying before was what I play and what instruments I play and the choices I make, it obviously it differs from genre to genre, setting to setting, artist to artist, And so as a working sideman, you just have to be very nimble and humble
Hmm.
when in those situations. Yeah.
Along those lines, if you look at a lot of percussionists setup, and I've done pop gigs too, and
Sure.
we bring a lot of stuff, right? Because part of it is the eye candy aspect. They want to see you. They don't want to see you back there with two congas and a set of bongos. They want to see
Yeah.
the seed pods and the chimes and the gongs and the this and the that and the udu drum and the. But at the same time, there's a danger, of overplaying, right? There's so many things that we have at our fingertips. Uh, we can overdo it. How how do you keep yourself in check so you don't, you're not overdoing it?
Um, First and foremost, my attitude is to play the most effective thing possible. So,
Hmm.
um, in the situation for the song, um, and that may even just come down to instrument choice as well. Whether I have a gigantic rig, I don't necessarily feel compelled to play everything in front of me. That's my version of all 88 keys of the keyboard in front of me. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean I have to like stomp on every every
Right. Oh, good
every key
analogy.
on the
Yes.
piano. You know, Sometimes
Yeah.
it just takes a lyrical single line, and so that's kind of the way I approach it. It's like the next three songs in the set list may only call for a shaker or a tambourine,
Right.
and so I'm not going to do anything more than that. Again, you kind of have to take your ego out of it a little bit. Um, and the other thing is, what's interesting, I've learned over the years is finding the most effective thing in one situation may sound completely awful in another situation. So like I've come across like say a shaker that literally sounds like a plastic tube with like gravel in it, like the
Hmm.
most raunchy, um, brittle, not pretty sounding shaker. And it gets sent to me that by one of the companies that, as kind of a sample, hey, check this out. And I'll listen to it and be like, oh my God, this is awful. I would never play it. Then I end up going on tour with Fleetwood Mac. I'm like, that's exactly the shaker that is going to cut through the
Uh-huh.
line of guitar amps directly in front of me. So just the high end of that horrible sounding shaker is what's going to cut through to the back of the audience. And I'm like, oh, it sounds absolutely terrible in person, but like this is like the most effective instrument for this situation. So one, I tend to hoard a lot of instruments because you just never know what you're going to need. And two, like I learned even just on that last Fleetwood Mac tour, which was 2018, 2019, like there are several instruments that I used that I would never use in the studio in a close miking situation that sound absolutely awful to me. But but they worked for playing arenas and stadiums. You know, so
That's a good point. Yeah, and I like that you're thinking as a musician, you're thinking about the totality. You're thinking about the audience experience, not what
yeah,
you're doing, right? Often we can get sucked into like, well, I can do this and I can play that and here's what
yeah,
and we play what we know or what we want to play and we're not thinking. I think the mature musician thinks about the product, right? Thinks about
yeah.
the
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 resultant,
totality.
yes,
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
most definitely, yeah.
Right.
And that obviously that completely depends on the genre again and the volume and the of the music itself
Right.
and the instrumentation on stage and the size of the audience and venue. Yeah, most definitely.
And this also touches on this idea of knowing music, knowing the instruments, knowing how the instrument is going to impact a piece of music. There's a lot to it. I mean, and so
Yeah,
even your example of a shaker, like this kind of rocky, gravelly shaker that most people would probably pick up and put down, and not think about it. There's a lot that goes into figuring out, what, this is the right tool for this thing, and I'm going to make it work in this situation because
yeah,
that's what we do as that we're musicians. We're not just up there, shaking stuff and hitting
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. Or sometimes it will like blow me away where like I'll see a percussionist who I respect very much, but like some of their choices are just, I won't say terrible, but they're just not effective. In certain
Uh huh.
situations. And it's like, oh yeah, I use the shaker on ballads, and then I'll watch them and like you can't hear the shaker at all. You just literally
Mm-hmm.
because it sounds like a super delicate sand like, filled delicate shaker, but I'm like, why would you be playing that during the screaming guitar solo or something? It's like you
Uh
can't even
huh.
hear it. So like I'm always thinking about like what is the resultant sound and what is the most effective choice in a situation,
Yeah.
So I'm constantly doing
Well.
that. So I'm constantly analyzing textures as well,
Mm-hmm.
as
Right.
a brass tambourine versus a steel jingle tambourine versus copper. What shimmers, what cuts through, what sounds darker. I'm always looking at shades and timbres of various instruments. Yeah,
And that's what an experienced musician does is just fine tuning. It's like the
yeah,
classical guitar players. That
yeah, yeah,
that just they get down to such fine. Well, everybody gets down to detail, but yeah,
yeah,
you're right. as percussionists too, we're often added on as a enhancement, right, to what's there. So we have to find our own sonic space, and for
Definitely, yeah.
example, people ask me, and I'm sure they ask you, how should I tune my congas? And I'm like, well, you got to find
Yeah,
a zone in there where it's like maybe it's not the same as the drum set. It's a little different than the rhythm guitar or the keyboard, right? You have to
yeah,
find a place where
totally.
you can have your instrument sit in there
Yeah,
to be heard.
definitely. I had a big conversation with a few drummers just about certain drummers are like, oh, I can't stand playing with percussionists because they step on me all the time. It's because of cymbals. Like, percussionists shouldn't have cymbals in their percussion rigs because they get in the way of the drummer. I'm just like, well, if a percussionist that has worked with a lot of drummers ought to know where their sonic space is
Right.
in the scope of cymbal choices where they're not necessarily having redundant cymbals or playing redundant parts or crashes or whatnot that the drummer is, or something like that. So yeah, so that's a whole can of worms to get into in
Right.
terms of choices for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, of course, and as percussionists, and I'd like to shift into this
yeah,
idea of collecting sounds, and my old college roommate, who Brian Kilgore, is one of
sure,
the great sound collectors of our
yeah,
generation,
yeah,
and it's all about finding that sound that's unique, not just to you, but unique in that musical setting. So in the band, like you're not going to have the same types of cymbals that the drummer has necessarily, but
yeah,
you might have, cup chimes and china cymbals, and you're going to have different sounding cymbals. So
yeah, definitely,
hopefully use them
yeah,
appropriately.
yeah,
But
definitely.
I want to ask you about your I don't know what you want to call it, the loop library, or what do you call it? You just did something for singer songwriters. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about that and how you constructed, because there are considerations for that.
oh,
Uh,
definitely, definitely.
yeah.
I was approached. There's a company, a platform called Splice. Essentially, Splice is uh, a online library that is subscription based that producers or musicians, whomever, will pay a monthly fee, and they within their fee structure they are allotted X amount of samples per month.
Mm,
And I was not familiar with them, but I was approached by them to do a percussion sound library. Um, Rather than just do your typical library of just percussion grooves, I was started to think about what would be the most effective and usable grooves for young and upcoming producers, singer songwriters, artists right now. And right now in the YouTube culture, are so many what they call kind of bedroom pop artists
mm-hmm.
who will sing and loop vocals, loop parts, play ukulele, or little keyboard parts, guitar, whatnot. And so I kind of took it from, well, if this person were to be doing a little club coffee house show with a little loop pedal and playing ukulele and singing parts, if I was a percussionist up on stage with them, what instruments would I be playing that would work well in a very small acoustic setting? And so that was kind of the framework of that library, which I called bedroom pop beats and percussion.
Mm,
And so I had a lot of like very organic sounding instruments like cajones and very shakers and tambourines and finger snaps, hand claps, and those types of things. So I constructed various grooves at kind of optimal tempos that I
mm-hmm.
saw that a lot of singer songwriters were using. And so that's really kind of that was the impetus of the whole idea, was to meet that need of the home bedroom pop YouTuber artist. And so I created a loop library from that perspective.
I really like that idea, and I love that you thought that way. And
Yeah,
it's so appropriate. And I just want to say that if anybody is thinking about producing any kind of product, do what Taku did here, which is consider the end user. What do they need? Who is the customer, right?
yeah, exactly.
And then do what they need
Yeah,
instead
yeah,
of doing what you want to do. which is like line up 8 taikos and go crazy and play, percussion instrument. That's awesome. That is such. It's just such a good model of serving the community, but also being a good business person, like creating a product that people can use.
Yeah.
That they are using. It goes with what they're doing. I love
Yeah.
that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. At the end of the day, yeah, if you do, I feel like if you do something so quote unquote buyer specific, you're going to have fewer buyers, right? Or if you're going to do it something so self-serving, look at me, basically,
Right.
do a drum solo to show off my chops and then just cut it up into, you know, 3-beat snippets. That's not that useful for
Hmm.
somebody scoring a film or using it on their own personal project. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you played things that, I mean, I listened to some of it and I watched the video. There's a video, by the way, on your website, right?
Mhm.
Which is your name.com, Taku Hirano,
It's
right?
actually
Oh,
my
Taku
first name, Taku.ninja.
no, dot ninja. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
again, thank you
yeah,
for the correction.
that's good.
Taku.ninja. There's some nice, I want to encourage people to go there as soon as they're done watching this too, to just see some of the videos you have there. Because you've got, at least when I was there, you had 3 videos right on the front page and you can just watch them really quick.
Yeah,
And they're all different about different things. And so people can
yeah,
check that out.
yeah,
And we'll, of course, leave a link, but you guys have it, taku.ninja.
yeah,
So that brings us to, I think, the topic of self-expression. You of course you do a ton of sideman stuff. You did this loop library, and that's all. It's amazing. It's great. We got to work. You're a working musician, but where you also are an artist, and you want to express yourself, and so you've done that. You recorded a CD or an album. I don't want to say CD anymore. I don't a recording.
yeah. Yes, yes.
um,
An
tell us
album's
about
worth
that.
of
And
I
yeah,
created an album's worth of material, whether
yes.
you choose to listen to it in succession like an album or pick and choose and stream it or whatnot. So yeah, the impetus of that was really, I was living in New York City. Pre-pandemic, I lived in New York for 11 years, and then I moved back to California mid-pandemic. But
Hmm.
during my years in New York, got together with a couple friends, New York-based friends that we went to college together. We went to Berkeley together, and really it was just us having a drink, going, "Man, it would be so fun to play all those songs that we used to play on each other's recitals and around town," you know. And that genre of music
Mm.
was or is like 70s era jazz fusion funk stuff. So it was like Miles Electric Band, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Herbie Hancock kind of Headhunters era, George Duke, uh, George Duke, Billy Cobham stuff, New Orleans funk like the Meters, Dr. John.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was like all the stuff we love playing. We're like, we should book some gigs and play that stuff just for fun, and even come up with our own music kind of in that style. And it was a fun idea. And then I just spearheaded it. And I said, I'm going to book some gigs, and if you guys don't mind, then I'm going to just build a band around me, including you guys.
Mm.
My 2 friends that I went to Berkeley with are a drummer and a keyboardist, so we filled it in with uh, a bassist and a guitarist, and we started booking gigs. And one of the venues I played uh, had a full, like, on the soundboard, they had a multi-track Pro Tools rig. And so a few of those gigs that we did, once we were kind of up and running, we recorded just for posterity. And then fast forward, I ended up getting a record deal from
Mm.
Rope-A-Dope. Rope-A-Dope is kind of a jazz funk label based in Philadelphia. And with that, I decided, oh, I'm going to take this band, my band, into the studio. And then the pandemic hit. And then
Mm.
then it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do? Obviously, we can't go in the studio. We're on lockdown in New York City. And then, the idea came to me, oh, well, I have all this like multi-track material. Like, let me start pouring through it. And that was pretty much like the first half of lockdown. Like the first year, it was just about going through everything and mixing everything into one cohesive, you know, um, live show, basically. And so it met the need of, I had so many friends having lived in Los Angeles so long that kept telling me, bring your band to LA. I want to see it if it's at like a small jazz club like the Baked Potato or something in LA, like you guys should book some gigs in LA. Well, now all of my friends in LA who had wanted to see this band that was playing around New York, like I was like, I'm gonna mix it in such a way that it's gonna sound like you're like literally right there, at one of my shows. And so that was kind of the vision of that live album. And so it was my debut uh, album as an artist ended up being a live album. So it's called
I
Blue York, Blu
Blue York, right?
Yor. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to say that I loved that throwback, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to
Yeah.
Forever vibe.
Yeah.
That's what we were playing. We were trying to play in high
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and that energy, yeah, that sort of fusion, that was a really cool time.
Yeah.
For me, it was musicians' music, right? It wasn't,
Yeah.
none of that stuff was really on the radio much. I mean, maybe some public radio station here and there, but very cool sound. And I love I really do like the live aspect. It had,
Thank
live
you.
albums always have that certain kind of energy where you hear the
Yeah.
audience. And so, yeah, I encourage people to check that out. That is on Bandcamp? Is that right? Well, you have
It
the
is on.
record.
Yeah, it's on
Yeah.
Bandcamp. It is on Bandcamp, and yeah, and it's on all streaming platforms. I'll prefer you go to Bandcamp, but it's anywhere you consume your music, it is there, whether it be
Okay, good. Good.
Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer or whomever. Yeah, it's all there.
Nice.
So yeah, yep.
And I could definitely hear the Giovanni influence coming out.
Oh yeah.
At least that's what I thought. Uh,
Oh no, definitely. I mean that
yeah.
he was my one main teacher. So like any like more advanced techniques on congas, it's all him. It's all my time spent practicing his vocabulary, for sure.
Well, I think you honored him well,
Thank
as he
you.
deserves to be.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, and it's great to have that little, legacy because, Gio's just an amazing guy, amazing teacher, and just,
Yeah,
there you go. I mean,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
carrying on a bit of that sound and the vibe and the energy, and it's awesome.
Thank you.
Um, I want to just circle around and touch back on the idea, on the Berkeley and Cal Arts, and without getting into a lot of description, but I guess the question I wanted to ask you is, who do you feel? Because sometimes people want to consider going to one of those places, right? Or they want to find out about it.
Yeah.
As far as this is your opinion, but who should go to Berkeley and or Cal Arts, and who maybe should not go to Berkeley or Cal Arts?
Got it.
You know?
It is a commitment. It's a time commitment. It's a financial commitment to go to
Mm-hmm.
any institution of higher learning, uh, but definitely one that is very focused. Going to Berkeley or Cal Arts, Berkeley even more so is like going to a vocational school, where you're going to learn all the tools of the trade. Um, I would say that the person who wants a top to bottom thorough education in not only the craft of music, but also the trade of
Mm,
music and the
mm,
music business. Because at Berkeley, it's a very expensive school unless you have some scholarships and whatnot. But what you get when you're there will probably far exceeds what the average serious student of music could even imagine. Now like you're going to have access to learning all of the software, whether it
mm,
be Finale and notation software or programming, obviously kind of nuts and bolts stuff like arranging, um, and like for me, for instance, I ended up doing a performance slash music business major for my undergrad. And then as electives, like mandatory electives, I chose to take like introductory film scoring classes. I had to take several levels of arranging for big band. And, those final projects were like literally going in front of a project big band with your charts and conducting the band, so that the recording has to accompany the score that you turn in for your final project. I mean, it's like, as a serious percussionist going in there, like I still couldn't fathom that I was going to have to do that, you know. Uh,
yeah, that's
you know,
amazing.
for, so like it made me such a well-rounded musician that now like do I need to read or write horn parts and transpose for trumpet, or whatever from a concert score? Like, I don't really, but I know that I understand it, and I can read it and I can do it. But and so the candidate for somebody to go to an institution like Berkeley is somebody who wants to like really further themselves and kind of be a bona fide through and through musician and music business person, you know.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, to really enter the industry, uh, not only with the knowledge and the experience, but also uh, graduate amongst a group of people who are all, or a large number of them will be in the industry as well. So you're making tons of connections as well. So I think it's worth it, but that's because
Hmm.
I foresaw or visualized myself as being somebody that worked in the music industry. So,
Hmm.
so the person who would not is probably somebody who, you know, it, they may not want to do 4 years of super intensive studies on certain things, aspects that they may not be interested in, like music copyright law and
Hmm.
publishing and stuff like that.
They
All
want to
very,
focus more, maybe.
yeah, they want, and then I would say, then as a percussionist, maybe it would do you more good to go somewhere where you could study with a master percussionist in the field of or instrument that you want to study. So that money spent towards higher education in a place like Berkeley could be spent, studying abroad, in Brazil or Cuba or West
Hmm.
Africa, or something, or just seeking out a teacher. It doesn't even have to be a teacher that's overseas, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I
And
would
just
say.
take on more of a journeyman, apprenticeship kind of
Definitely,
position. That's a good point.
definitely, yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yep.
And what about Cal Arts? Do you feel this the same, similar, or Cal Arts, of course, doesn't have as I don't think has as much on the business side. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you think
I'm
about
not
Cal Arts as a
I'm not
choice?
100% sure. I went there for grad school. I never finished because I ended up for that 2 year program of a master's of fine arts. I ended up starting to get calls to go on tours.
Mm,
So at that point in time, I was like, well, I moved to LA really to do that, to be a session
hmm.
and touring percussionist. And I wouldn't say that grad school is my backup, but I used that as it got me to LA where I wanted to be and where the scene was. But at the same time, it gave me 2 years get my master's degree in 2 years. In those 2 years in Los Angeles, I'm going to hit the pavement and really try to network and get myself out there on the scene as much as possible. At the end of 2 years, if nothing comes of it, I never land a gig, then I'm at the very least going to walk out of there with a master's degree and able to teach at a higher education level. And then I'll reassess and say, will I stay in LA or will I start applying to, universities and educational institutions that may want me as an instructor. So that was
Mm,
kind of like my backup plan. So that was that. But I do have to say, Cal Arts was definitely more an artistic school, where I felt that Berkeley was more like a vocational school.
mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
different, slightly different orientation, different people, but it's great to network. Like you said, I mean, you're going to meet. That's one benefit of going to any college, I would say, for anybody is the
most definitely.
networking, and you
Yeah,
meet instructors, you meet fellow students. A lot of those people that go on will be working in the business, etc. So yeah,
yeah. And then energetically surrounding yourself with people who, one, are better than you, but two, just share your interests. That's always a healthy thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, so as we start, we're going to wrap up fairly. We're not done quite yet, but I just thought maybe you could speak to the person who is out there, because the World Drum Club, we have a lot of enthusiasts, right? Just percussion fans. I get questions all the time. What do you recommend I do? I just want to do that. I want to play percussion for fun. I'm not going to try to, it's not. They're not doing it for work. They're not doing it as a career, but they want to have fun. For example, one question is, what drum should I get, or how do what should I focus on? And I just want to
Yeah.
get your take. I know what I would say, but what would you tell somebody who, wants to do some gigs as a percussionist?
Mhm.
How do they get started? I know it's a broad question, but What
Uh,
advice would you give?
if okay, so if they want to do gigs, then I would choose an instrument that would work for gigs, meaning, in specific styles of music. So like it could be like, oh, I want to start on cajon, or I want to play congas, or I want to just I'm singing, but I want to play a little percussion on the side. So then maybe I should
Hmm.
learn some of the handheld stuff first and how to play it correctly and in rhythm and in tempo. So I would kind of, if that were the situation, then I would say, oh yeah, maybe cajon, maybe congas, and some handheld percussion instruments.
Hmm.
If you're just an enthusiast in terms of I want to buy one drum and I want to play it to my heart's content, and then at some point jam with other people who will have other drums, I would say then find a drum or the sound of a drum that really resonates with you, whether that's a djembe or that's a frame drum, whether that's congas or bongos. Just
Hmm.
what, because at the end of the day, you're gonna want to play and commit yourself to something that you like the sound of,
Right.
and you're gonna get jazzed and excited when you are able to start playing rhythms and produce the sound that you have in your mind's ear. You know,
Right.
uh, so that's what I would say. So it's like find what really resonates with you, and, and then learn the technique, learn the nuts and bolts of how to play the drum properly, how to take care of the instrument, in terms of tuning and the head and repairs and whatnot, because you owe it to that instrument as well in honor of it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I would say. It's kind of general, but it really comes down to what you want to learn. So
No, that's
you
great.
just
I think that's totally valid and great advice. And I like
yeah,
that you brought up that point about caring for the instrument. It is a relationship. We have a
yeah,
relationship with every one of our instruments,
oh yeah,
and
definitely,
we take care of them. They take care of us, right? So
yeah.
even
And learning proper technique, because it is skin on skin for the most part, and
right,
hand percussion, it's like you can injure yourself if you don't play the instrument correctly. There is technique involved. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to bang away and play what I feel. It's like, not really. And when I teach conga lessons, people are really amazed at, like, oh, I thought it was just like going to be so easy. It's like, no, there's actually like a lot of technique to the drum just to produce certain sounds and certain tones. So it is a commitment for sure.
absolutely, yeah. And we
Yeah,
want people to enjoy percussion. We want them to be safe and healthy and not injure themselves.
yeah, yeah,
Along those lines, sometimes people say, "Oh, I got a set of bongos, right? Because I want to go play with my friends or hand percussion." And I sometimes I actually dissuade people from getting bongos because to me, bongos are one of the most difficult instruments in terms of being comfortable as a player. They're
yeah,
you need technique. Otherwise,
yeah,
your hands are gonna hurt.
yeah. You're
So
definitely going to have, like, yeah, you're going to definitely get the abrasions and the cuts and the blisters and the bruised bones and whatnot, possibly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Not to
bongos. So
mention how
I
uncomfortable it can be, like sitting with bongos if you don't really are not used to it. Playing
exactly.
traditional. Yeah,
If you're holding them in a traditional way, they're heavy. So I've steered people towards if they want a small drum, for example, I'll say, well, get a darbuka, get a doumbek, and
yeah,
start with that. It's super comfortable, lightweight. Put it in your lap. Take it. You could take it anywhere, and for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
But yeah, cajon definitely a good one
yeah,
for
yeah.
everyone, and
Same though. I mean,
yeah.
that I've had cajon injuries,
Mm-hmm.
myself. Whether it's pinched nerves in my shoulder from hunching down and playing on tour, or just lower back issues because you are hunched over. It's you're not playing necessarily, the membrane that you're playing is wood as opposed to skin, which is not as
Right.
so wood is not as forgiving. So I definitely had, I've bruised myself and whatnot. So yeah, even as a person who is working as a professional and has learned technique, you're like, yeah, yeah, you can definitely still get carried away and injure yourself. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Technique is always, number one, especially also for, you know, power, speed. I mean, those come from technique, right? They don't come from
yeah,
muscle, you know, they come from
most definitely, yeah,
efficiency. Yeah.
yes, efficiency, and then beyond that, it's just endurance, and all that is just practice. So
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, last thing is what do you do for fun? What would what would surprise people to know about you, or what anything else you want to share with?
Uh, for fun, I love to travel, which thankfully, as my career allows me to travel, whether I like it or not. Sometimes
Hmm.
I have to travel.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, other than that, like because of what I do, not only playing hand percussion but also traveling and doing it, it's so physically taxing that oftentimes, like physical fitness is kind of my hobby at this point because I have so little time in my day.
We got a little
In
delay
the
here.
gym,
Hold on. There we go.
uh,
Okay.
when I'm in
Yeah,
the
you froze
gym,
for a second. That's okay. Hmm.
oh, I'm sorry. When I'm in the gym, I am thinking like what would improve my work as a professional traveling percussionist. So I do
Mm.
work on rotator cuffs. I do work on various exercises for my back. I do a lot of cardio. So not really fun, but that I would say that's kind of my extracurricular hobbies at this point in time, and they have been for throughout my professional career. Yeah.
Well, that's always a good thing. We all have to stay fit, and that translates, of course, into not just work support, but life quality of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that is all you can. There's a little fitness room in the hotel, and that's all you can really do in a day, or
Yeah.
maybe go for a walk.
Yeah. But yeah, it is a constant uh, balance, or it's a constant struggle to balance like work and life. You know, so when I'm not on the road, yeah, I just spend a lot of time with my wife, who's my best friend, and we just oh, let's go try out this restaurant. Oh, we got to catch up on this Netflix thing that we're binging. I think we froze. You
Yeah,
there?
froze for a
Okay.
second.
Oh,
I blame Spectrum Internet, but
okay.
but good. The good news is, so this is the first interview I've done like this on this platform, and yay! I mean, I thought
Yeah.
it was so great to connect with you, and I just want to thank you for sharing so much and being so generous with your
Of
time.
course. Yeah, it's my
And
pleasure.
yeah, and now in terms of people reaching out to you, or wanting to have a lesson or something, or wanting to just connect with you more,
Yeah.
how
through
do they
my
do that?
website, through my website, taku.ninja. You can write to me. There's a little platform to write to me on that, or just I'm on Instagram fairly frequently, and that's literally just at my name, Taku Hirano. At Taku Hirano is my handle. So those are two ways to connect with me easily.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I might hit you up to do we have a thing right now on our Facebook page where it's called Show Us Your Kits. And
Okay.
it's just people. So maybe if you're on the road sometime, you could shoot a quick little video of your setup or something, and then
Okay. Yeah. Most
send it
definitely.
over.
And currently I'm with Leanne Rhymes, and I'm kind of playing a hybrid role of kind of like drummer slash percussionist. There's no
Mm.
traditional drum set. And I was originally hired to be like, it's going to be more acoustic. So we're just going to play Cajon. And then it's slightly morphing into like Cajon on some songs. And then this has happened in other gigs where like, oh yeah, you're just going to play percussion. And then like, oh, we kind of need a kick and snare on this song, or a kick and snare and hats. Oh, you may want to add some stuff. So like it ends up like building. So that happened on the Lindsey Buckingham tour also, where he was like, oh no, we're just going to play Cajon only. And then it turned out by the end of the tour, the cajon was literally just a drum throne, and I had like a drum kit, and I was sitting on a cajon, but I had like hi hat, snare, toms, and cymbals.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all that to say, but currently with Leanne, I have kind of a hybrid kit where I have cajon, djembe, two congas, and then kick and a snare where I play a lot of like.
Nice. It's freezing again. Come on back. Come on back. Come on. There we go.
I'm
Okay.
here. Okay, yeah.
Uh,
I was just saying. So yeah, so I have a hybrid kit. So when I get back on the road with her, it'll be I can do a quick tour of it. It's a pretty interesting setup for that specific
that would
gig.
be yeah. That'd be nice. We like the
Yeah.
hybrid kits.
Yep. Very cool. Will do.
Taku, thank you so much.
Of course. Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Take care. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, check us out over at patreon.com/Kalani. If you're not a member, you'll get access to a lot more over there than is here on YouTube for free. If you have any ideas or requests for future percussion discussions, let me know. You can contact me through my website, kalanimusic.com. And go out and make some great music, everyone. Thanks for watching.